You already know a woman like this. She walks into a room and she doesn't perform. She doesn't over-explain, she doesn't over-smile, she doesn't scan the room checking if she's liked. And here's the part that will bother you a little. She is not the woman who followed every rule about being pleasant. She is not the most agreeable one in the group, the most cheerful one, the one everyone quietly calls so positive. Confidence like that isn't built by being good. It's built by something most women are taught from a very young age to be ashamed of. The women who seem the most free are usually the ones who stopped hiding the parts of themselves they were told to keep hidden. Not the anger. Not the ambition. Not the want. By the end of this video you will understand exactly what that means, and why it explains almost every confident woman you've ever quietly envied from a distance without knowing why. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it in yourself either. Carl Jung spent decades studying why some people feel whole and others feel like they are performing their own life from morning to night. His answer had almost nothing to do with willpower, discipline, or just believing in yourself, and almost everything to do with a psychological structure he called the persona. The mask, the socially acceptable version of a person that gets built early to keep them safe, liked, and accepted by the group around them. The persona isn't fake exactly. It's real, it's useful, it's how a person gets through a job interview or a first dinner with a partner's parents without alarming anyone in the room. The problem starts the moment the mask stops being something you wear and becomes the only thing you know how to be. When nice is no longer a choice you make, but the single shape you've learned to take no matter what's happening underneath it. Jung said that everything the persona pushes out doesn't disappear just because it's no longer visible. It goes somewhere he called the shadow, the collection of feelings, urges, and traits a person represses because somewhere along the way someone taught them those parts were unacceptable. For women specifically, that repression starts so early in life it stops feeling like repression at all. It just feels like being a good person, a reasonable person, a woman other people are comfortable around. This generalizes further than most people expect, and it doesn't need a difficult childhood or an obvious wound to take hold. It only needs 1,000 small ordinary moments where being agreeable was rewarded, and being honest about anger, want, or ambition was quietly, politely corrected. For most of her life, a woman is handed a very specific, very narrow definition of what good looks like. Warm, agreeable, endlessly available to whoever needs her. Positive, cheerful, upbeat, even in moments when none of that is true. This is the acceptable persona, the social mask built almost entirely out of whatever keeps the people around her comfortable. And here is the trap nobody warns her about. This mask gets mistaken for confidence constantly by strangers, by co-workers, sometimes even by the woman herself. Picture the woman at a family dinner who smiles through a comment that actually stung, because naming the sting would make the table uncomfortable for everyone else. Picture the one at work who says, "Sure, no problem," to a request that quietly costs her an entire weekend, because refusing feels like it would cost her something bigger, her reputation as the reliable one. Picture the friend who laughs off a joke made at her expense in front of a group, because calling it out would make her the one who can't take a joke, instead of the one who was actually hurt. None of that is confidence. It is performance, and performance is exhausting in a very specific way, not the tired that comes from effort but the tired that comes from being someone else for hours at a time. Jung would describe this as an identification with the persona, meaning the mask has been worn for so long that the woman genuinely cannot tell anymore where the mask ends and where she actually begins. That's the mechanism underneath all of it. Not lying, not weakness, just years and years of quiet practice turning a mask into a face. Real confidence can look similar on the surface. The same warmth, the same ease in a crowded room, but it is built from somewhere completely different underneath. One version is constructed to be seen a certain way by other people. The other version doesn't need to be seen at all in order to feel steady from the inside. The gap between those two things is invisible from the outside and enormous on the inside, and most women spend years, sometimes decades, mistaking the first one for the second because nobody ever showed them the difference. Until the day something finally cracks and the performance simply stops working. That crack always starts in the exact same place. The parts of her that the acceptable mask was never allowed to include in the first place. So what exactly gets left out of that acceptable version of a woman? 3 things, mostly, and they show up in almost every story of a woman who eventually became unmistakably, undeniably confident. The first is anger. Not rage, not cruelty toward other people. The ordinary, healthy signal that something has crossed a line and needs to be addressed. Girls are corrected for this earlier than almost any other emotion. A boy's anger tends to get called passion, drive, leadership, while a girl's gets quietly labeled being difficult. And by the time she reaches adulthood, most women have already learned to convert anger into tears, into silence, into a sudden headache, instead of into a plain sentence. The second is desire, sensuality, appetite, the simple want of pleasure or attention on her own terms, instead of waiting patiently to be chosen for it by someone else. A woman who openly wants something is still, in 100 small everyday ways, treated as too much, so wanting gets renamed as vanity, and she learns very early to want quietly in private or not to name the want out loud at all. The third is ambition that refuses to wrap itself in modesty, wanting more money, more recognition, more visible power, without immediately apologizing for the wanting. A man who wants a promotion says so in the meeting in plain language and nobody in the room considers it strange. A woman who wants that same promotion often finds herself explaining it away before anyone even asks, calling it luck, calling it timing, calling it, I was just in the right place, anything except the plain, uncomplicated truth that she wanted it and worked for it on purpose. Watch how often a woman follows a genuine accomplishment with an immediate disclaimer. It's really the team, not me. I got lucky with the timing. Anyone would have done the same thing. Each one of those sentences might sound like humility, and sometimes it is, but underneath a pattern that repeats for years, it is usually something else entirely. An old, well-practiced reflex to make ambition small enough that nobody in the room feels threatened by it, including her. These three things, anger, desire, and unapologetic ambition, are exactly what Jung meant by the shadow. Not bad traits in any real sense, just the traits a woman's environment refused to approve of, pushed underground early, and left to survive quietly in the dark for years. And here is the tension this raises that the next part of this video has to answer. If these traits never actually disappear, where do they go, and what do they cost a woman who keeps them buried for decades of her life? Here is what that repression actually costs, and it doesn't cost confidence in some vague, poetic, hard-to-measure way, it costs something specific and physical. A woman who has spent 20 years translating anger into a smile is tired in a way that a good night's sleep simply does not fix, because the effort was never physical, it was the constant, invisible labor of editing herself in real time, sentence by sentence, all day, every day. A woman who has spent that long being known as the nice one often describes a very particular hollow feeling sitting underneath all of that visible positivity, a quiet sense that if people actually saw the unedited version of her, the one underneath the performance, they would leave or judge her or stop liking her entirely. That fear is the real, ongoing cost of the shadow staying buried. Not that the traits eventually disappear on their own, but that a woman slowly starts to believe those exact traits are the parts of her that make her unlovable in the first place. And a woman who believes that will keep performing warmth long after the warmth stopped being true, because showing what's underneath feels, to her nervous system, far more dangerous than the exhaustion of continuing the performance. This is where most women get stuck for years, sometimes decades, sometimes for the length of an entire marriage or an entire career, quietly convinced this is simply who they are. But repression was never actually a permanent, working solution, no matter how long it seems to hold, because what gets pushed down does not stay quiet forever, and what happens next explains a long list of, out of nowhere, moments women are usually told to be embarrassed about instead of understanding. Here is what almost nobody explains about repression. It does not hold, not indefinitely, not for anyone. Jung's core observation on this was blunt. Whatever is not consciously faced and accepted does not vanish, it comes back, and it almost always comes back sideways, usually at the worst possible moment, in front of the wrong audience. This is why a woman who has swallowed her anger politely for years can suddenly find herself furious over something small. A dish left in the sink, the wrong tone of voice at dinner, and not understand why the reaction inside her feels 10 times bigger than the moment in front of her actually deserves. It is not the dish. It is every unspoken, I'm fine from the last 15 years finally finding a door. This is why desire that has been denied for years does not simply fade quietly with time. It resurfaces instead as obsession, as an affair that seems to appear out of nowhere, as a sudden and disorienting need for a stranger's attention. Because the want never actually disappeared, it only went looking for an exit that was left unguarded. And this is why buried ambition often turns into its own opposite. A quiet, simmering resentment toward other women who did pursue what she never let herself pursue, dressed up carefully as judgment. She's so aggressive, she's trying too hard, who does she think she is? When the real feeling sitting underneath all of it is envy she was never once given permission to name honestly, even to herself. Jung called this the return of the repressed, and it is rarely dramatic in the exact moment it happens. It is a tone sharper than the situation called for. It is a decision that looks reckless to everyone watching from the outside. It is a breakdown that appears to come out of nothing, when really it came from everything that was never let out through the front door, one honest sentence at a time. The traits were never actually defeated by being hidden away. They were only delayed, and the woman who keeps hiding them keeps quietly paying that delayed bill in installments she rarely recognizes as connected to the original debt underneath it all. There is one more place all of this hidden material tends to surface, and it is the one almost nobody sees coming. In how other women react to her the very moment she finally stops hiding. Watch closely what happens when a woman finally stops performing the acceptable version of herself in front of other people. She starts saying no without an apology stapled to the end of it. She names her ambition out loud in plain language instead of shrinking it down into, "I just got lucky." She lets herself want something openly, a promotion, a body, a different life entirely, without immediately managing everyone else's comfort about the wanting. And almost immediately, some of the loudest, sharpest criticism does not come from men. It comes from other women. She's changed. She thinks she's better than everyone now. She used to be so nice, what happened to her? This is not really at its core about her at all. Jung described a mechanism called shadow projection. When a person cannot tolerate a trait inside themselves, they will unconsciously attack that same trait the moment they see it living freely in someone else, because it is far easier to judge it out there, in her, than to sit with the discomfort of recognizing it quietly in here, in themselves. A woman who is still performing the acceptable mask, still repressing her own anger, her own desire, her own ambition day after day, will often feel something close to alarm when she watches another woman live without that same repression. Not because the other woman is doing anything wrong to her, because the other woman is doing the one thing she has never given herself permission to do, and permission that visible, worn that openly by someone else, is deeply uncomfortable to witness up close. The criticism, the sudden coldness, the gossip whispered in the group chat, none of that is real information about the woman who changed. That is a mirror nobody in that room asked to be handed. Look closer at the specific words that usually get used because they are rarely random. Aggressive is almost always aimed at a woman who simply stated what she wanted without softening it first. Trying too hard is almost always aimed at a woman who let herself be visibly ambitious instead of quietly hoping to be noticed. She's not who she used to be is almost always aimed at the exact moment a woman stopped being convenient for everyone around her. None of these phrases are actually about behavior. They are about discomfort. The specific discomfort of watching someone else do the one thing you have spent years training yourself not to do. A woman fully at peace with her own ambition does not feel threatened watching another woman chase hers. She might feel admiration, curiosity, even competitive energy, but not the sharp, defensive sting that produces gossip. That sting only shows up when the trait being witnessed is one still living, unclaimed, in someone's own shadow. This is one of the strangest and most consistent patterns in this entire process. The more a woman integrates what she used to hide, the more she becomes, almost without trying, a walking question mark to every single person still hiding theirs. And that reaction from other people, the sudden distance, the whispers, the strange feeling of no longer being welcome in rooms that used to feel effortless, is usually the exact moment a woman has to decide whether to retreat back into the mask or keep walking forward without it. What keeping going actually looks like is where most people get this completely wrong, and it is not what you would expect from the word shadow alone. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming cruel, cold, or careless with other people's feelings. It does not mean letting every angry impulse out unfiltered, chasing every desire the second it appears, or steamrolling other people in the name of ambition. That would simply be swapping one imbalance for another one, trading the mask for its exact opposite, instead of actually growing into something fuller and more honest. Jung was specific about this distinction. The goal was never to act out the shadow, it was to know it, to consciously recognize calmly, yes, this is in me too, instead of pretending for another decade that it simply isn't there. This is the actual turning point in the whole process, and it is far quieter than most people expect it to be. It is not a dramatic outburst in the middle of a dinner party. It is a woman noticing real, honest anger rising in a conversation, and instead of converting it into a smile the way she always has, saying calmly and plainly, "That didn't work for me," and then simply stopping there without adding 3 sentences of apology. It is a woman feeling genuine desire and, instead of shrinking it into shame, allowing herself to want it fully, without narrating an apology underneath the wanting. It is a woman naming her own ambition out loud in a meeting full of people. "I want that role and I've earned it," without immediately softening the sentence with a joke about how she doesn't mean to sound pushy. None of that is aggression, no matter how it gets labeled by people who preferred the quieter version of her. All of it is honesty that used to be strictly forbidden. Jung called this whole process individuation, becoming, consciously and deliberately, the fuller person a woman actually is underneath, instead of remaining only the socially approved fragment the persona was ever allowed to show. It is not about destroying the mask entirely and never wearing it again. It is about no longer needing the mask to hold her together from the inside. The woman who does this does not become an entirely different person. She becomes harder to perform for, including for herself, and that difference is exactly what people sense in her long before anyone around her can actually name what changed. If something in the last minute is already landing somewhere specific in you, that reaction is worth marking, not scrolling past. Not because a comment or a like changes anything about your shadow by itself, but because this exact idea, the one that just made something in your chest tighten, is easy to lose the second the video ends and the next one starts autoplaying. Hit like on this before you keep going, not for the algorithm but so this specific sentence has a way of finding its way back to you later, on the day you actually need it more than you do right now. If any part of this is already landing somewhere specific for you, this is usually the point where a woman starts noticing her own version of the mask for the first time, so sit with that for a second before we keep going, because the next part is where all of this actually gets tested in real life, not just in theory. That difference gets tested for the very first time the moment a woman tries it in front of someone who quietly preferred the old, easier version of her. Let that land for a second, because this next part is the part almost every woman who has done this work remembers in specific, vivid detail for years afterward. There is one particular moment, a dinner, a phone call, a room full of people who have known her for a very long time, where she finally says the thing instead of swallowing it the way she always has before. Maybe it is telling a partner, flatly and without softening it, that a pattern of being dismissed has to stop, immediately. Maybe it is telling a parent for the first time in 40 years, that a specific comment actually hurt her, and still does. Maybe it is simply saying no to something she has said yes to for a decade, without wrapping it in 3 paragraphs of justification and apology. Picture the actual dinner table. The candles, the same faces she has known her whole life, the same easy laughter that used to make this room feel safe. Someone makes the same joke they've made for years, the one that always gets a laugh at her expense, and this time instead of laughing along she says evenly, "That one's not funny to me anymore," and puts her fork down. And the room goes quiet in a way that feels almost like punishment. Nobody claps. Nobody says, "Good for you finally." Someone gets a strange, tight look across their face. Someone changes the subject quickly, almost too quickly. Someone later calls her different in a tone that is clearly not meant as a compliment. Maybe it's her sister pulling her aside in the kitchen to ask, almost gently, if everything is okay, as if calm honesty were itself a symptom of something wrong. Maybe it's a coworker who used to invite her to every lunch, suddenly a little harder to reach on the calendar for the next few weeks. Maybe it's her own mother on the phone that same night saying quietly, "You didn't used to talk like that," in a voice meant to sound worried but landing more like a warning. This is the exact moment the old programming screams the loudest inside her, insisting that the silence in the room means she has done something wrong, that the discomfort on their faces is proof she should take it back immediately, apologize, and quietly return to the version of herself that made everyone else comfortable. But notice carefully what she does not do in that moment. She does not take it back. She does not rush to fill the silence with an apology designed to soften the blow for everyone else in the room. She lets the discomfort simply exist in that space without racing to fix it, because fixing other people's discomfort was always, quietly, the entire job description of the old mask she used to wear. This is the exact spot where a woman finds out whether the change she has been building is real, or just a performance of a different kind wearing new words. And the ones who keep going instead of retreating are the ones this entire video has been describing since the very first sentence. Go back for a moment to the woman from the opening of this video, the one who walks into a room without performing, without scanning it for approval, without shrinking any part of herself down to keep the room comfortable around her. She is not calm because she has nothing left to hide from anyone. She is calm because she stopped being afraid of what would happen the moment people finally saw it. The anger she used to translate into a smile is now simply information she can act on or quietly set down, her choice on her own terms, not her enemy anymore. The desire she used to shrink down into shame is now simply hers, wanted openly, with no apology script running quietly underneath it. The ambition she used to disguise as luck is now a plain sentence she can say out loud in a room full of people, without flinching, without softening at first. None of that makes her cold. None of that makes her cruel. It makes her integrated, a whole person instead of a performance, a full woman instead of the small, acceptable fraction of one she used to offer the world. This is confidence that was never actually built on being liked, because it is built out of the exact material that used to threaten being liked at all. If any of this sounds like the woman you keep trying to become, the shift usually starts the same way it did for her. Not with a plan, but with one honest sentence you finally let yourself say out loud instead of editing it first. You stop translating anger into, "I'm fine." You stop apologizing for what you actually want. You stop performing modesty for ambition that has earned a name of its own. You start recognizing that the parts you were taught to be ashamed of were never the flaws to begin with. They were simply the unfinished parts of you, waiting patiently for a permission that was always only yours to give. That is the whole secret sitting behind every woman who has ever seemed impossibly confident to you from a distance. She was not happier because she followed every rule about being good. She was free because she finally stopped needing those rules to hold her together. Somewhere, right now, there is a woman doing this for the first time, putting down her fork at a dinner table exactly like the one described a moment ago, feeling her own heartbeat in her throat, wondering if the silence in the room means she made a mistake. She has not. What she is feeling is not proof that something has gone wrong. It is proof that something finally is going right, even though it doesn't feel like it yet. The mask took years to build, so it will not dissolve in a single dinner, a single sentence, a single moment of standing still in a quiet room. But every time she chooses honesty over the performance, the mask gets a little thinner, and the woman underneath it gets a little louder in her own life, until one day the performance simply is not necessary anymore. If this describes something you have spent years quietly hiding, name it below with one single word: unashamed. Not because typing a comment changes anything by itself, but because saying it, even here in this small way, is one more version of the exact thing this whole video has been about. Letting the parts of you that you were once told to hide finally take up space out in the open, starting now.